AmandaLand.
Let's get
I'm sorry. I need y'all to know that I put that together at 9:30. Okay? 9:30 a.m. I put that together. I was literally fixing my tea and I heard it in my head. Critical. And I was like, ah, and I got my tray and I got my oatmeal and I ran upstairs so I could record it and drop it down. Boom, 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 boom. Critical. Thinking. Yes, let's get into today's critical thinking exercise. So, there's a lot of talk right now, because this guy did this whole freezing of federal funding. And I can promise you, he doesn't have any clue how federal funding works. He's literally just being told what to do and doing it. And so he did it. He funded, they froze the federal funding. People went in a tizzy naturally. And thus, the confusion spread across like wildfire. And this was so many people that were like, well, they said it's not going to affect Medicare. They said it's not going to affect this and that. Sure, they said that, but do you think that they even thought it through on how it wouldn't do that? It did affect Medicare. The site was down. People could not access the Medicare site, so patients could not get discharged. It did affect Meals on Wheels. It did affect Head Start, etc. So you need to know that they just be saying stuff. They have no idea how things actually work. Okay? So let's just get that clear. Now, what this also makes you beg the question is, okay, well, who's in position to challenge this type of stuff? So we do have three branches of government. We have the executive branch, that's the president. We have the judicial branch, that is the Supreme Court. We have the legislative branch, that is the Congress. Now, Congress is made up of the House and the Senate. You got 435 members of the House. You got 100 members of the Senate. And the Senate is currently in a majority owned by the Republicans. The House is also in a majority owned by the Republicans. The Supreme Court is also in a majority conservative. So this is not by accident. This has been over years and years and years that they have finally got all the pieces in place to be able to push things through without hindrance. I think it is very considerable that this person is trying to push these things to the Supreme Court, because once the Supreme Court makes a ruling, it becomes precedent. And once it becomes precedent, it becomes the law of the land, even if it's just in precedent. So the goal is to push things through to get to that point so that they can make these rulings so that they can now continue to dismantle what they want to dismantle, which is essentially the entire Constitution. Now, we're looking at Democrats because essentially they're the only people in place right now that could even have access to stopping or changing things. But the reality is that they only have so much access and so much power because they've really been sitting on their laurels this entire time. Now, I know some people may be like, Amanda, you're always picking on Democrats, because people actually do say dumb shit like that to me. They say things like you're picking on Democrats, as if Democrats are like the little kid in the corner at lunch. Democrats are not the little kid in the corner at lunch, for the record, okay? Democrats are elected officials that should be representing the constituency. That's who Democrats are. And so I am simply somebody in the constituency that is expecting them and challenging them to represent. I think it's very important, though, to understand what have Democrats actually demonstrated in terms of how and who they represent. We will get to that in just a little bit. But first and foremost, I would like us to address this, which I thought was really interesting. So this person, Leah Greenberg, said, here are some things that the Dems can do to try to challenge what is going on right now. Okay? But I want us to use our critical thinking skills to break down what each of these things actually mean. So let's start with oppose all Trump nominees until this executive order is withdrawn. So when we talk about Trump nominees, Trump is, of course, nominating folks to the cabinet, right? Whether it's the Secretary of State or the Secretary of Defense, et cetera, et cetera. He is currently nominating all of these folks. And what we are seeing is that Democrats are letting these people get through. People like Pete Hegseth, who literally are the epitome of he is DEI. Well, he's WEI. Just white equality and inclusion. Because his whiteness is considering him equal to people with absolutely exceeding merit for this position. But because he's a white guy and he's willing to do what they want him to do, they're like, yeah, that's fine. Put him in. Now, they're still getting nominees approved. And the Democrats are actually allowing for some of these nominees to go through. So one of the things that they can do is to be a stalwart and put a stop on this and say, we're not going to approve anybody until you repeal this executive order. Now, the next thing that was suggested is that they that they stop unanimous consent. Okay, she suggested deny unanimous consent to slow Senate proceedings. So let's talk about what unanimous consent is. Unanimous consent is something that happens in the Senate. Now, at the beginning of every session, there's a rules package that both chambers decide on. The Senate and the House decide on their rules package. So, for instance, last Congress, they was pressing McCarthy. And they had created this rule that says that whenever they don't like him, they could vacate the House Speaker. That was literally what he had to accept in order to get the House Speaker job. And then they still vacated him. Anywho, they don't have this go round. Mike Johnson doesn't have to worry about that. Nonetheless, the rules package gets set in place. And when it comes to the House and the Senate, they vote differently. In the House, you are an individual, but you are a part of an entire consortium. You are representing your district. You're not representing your state. So you require everybody to go along with you. A majority in the House is 218. That's a simple majority. That's 218 of the 435. And the 218 right now is actually what Republicans have in the House. Now, there are 2 seats that are vacated. One of them is the guy who went over to be National Security Advisor, Michael Waltz. The other is Stefanik, who we can't stand her. That's the one who said that Israel has rights to Palestine because of the Bible. That's who that is. Exactly. So she is now the ambassador to the UN. Both of their seats have been vacated. Even if they were filled with Democrats, which they're not going to be, it still would not create a majority of Democrats in the House. So when they vote in the House, oh my God, I just hit the heck out of my elbow. Funny bone. Okay. I got to rub it out. I remember one time going to my friend's brother's Little League game and someone got hit with the ball and he went to rub it and they were like, don't rub it! I was like, let that little boy rub it out. Don't rub it! To this day, I am 43 years old and I still remember that when I have to rub some pain out. Don't rub it! Okay. Anywho, so you have this situation with the House where their voting is a majority. When it comes to the Senate, they have what's called unanimous consent. I don't think y'all understand how the Senate votes. They don't be having to be there a lot of times. They'll literally just send an email out hey, y'all cool with this? And then if one of the senators is not cool with it, then their assistant will hit back hey, Senator so-and-so is actually not cool with this. And then they're like, oh my God, I guess we got to go to work. And then they come into work and then they got to do with the debate and all of that. But unanimous consent is the fact that they will literally just send out an email called a hotline. It's 5 a.m. I'm up sending emails to you. Yes, it's literally called a hotline. Do you know how bugged out that is? That it's called a hotline, and they will literally send out that email. And so what they're saying is, what this young lady is saying is, there should be no hotline emails moving forward. Everything has to go to a vote. The vote requires cloture. Cloture sounds like the name that a Kardashian would give to one of their lines. Like, I feel like if Khloe Kardashian started her own line, it would be called Cloture, right? You want closure, don't you? Like, I feel like that's what the ad would be. Cloture is a proceeding to close debate and move it to the next vote. Cloture happens after the debate. At the beginning of every vote, the majority leader will say, all right, y'all, these are the rules. Y'all got 30 minutes each, Dems and Republicans, to talk about this. Figure out who you want to put in that 30 minutes. And after that, cloturing. All right? Now, the only thing that stops this is a filibuster. In the filibuster, someone can be like, well, okay, I know we only had 30 minutes, but I'm actually going to filibuster, and I'm just going to talk. And filibuster means you're just talking nonstop and you have to remain standing. You can tap in and tap out, but you got to continue standing. For the record, the longest filibuster of all time was against the Civil Rights Bill, and it was done by Strom Thurmond. That's how dedicated he was to us not having civil rights. He was like, I'm going to stand up here and just talk because I hate these blacks so much. So I'm going to just talk. Do you understand how much hatred you have to drive yourself to hoarseness just to stop us from being able to like live? Anywho, that is what happens. So they get in there, they debate, and then the majority person says, all right, so we did our debate. Let's cloture it. There has to be 3 clotures, 3 votes, and there has to be 30 hours between each cloture. During each 30 hours is when you can try to whip up votes or chat or have a glass of Hennessy or whatever to try to convince the other people like, nah, you know how you had voted last time? I don't think you really understand what we were talking about. Come on over. Rarely is this effective. But this is the process. And they're saying that you should just demand all of the clotures, all 3 clotures, because sometimes, baby, they'll literally in the rules package make a rule for if they don't have time to do all the clotures that they can just change the rules. This thing is a whole made up game. I don't think you understand that the government is Uno. You know how all of us make up our own rules in Uno? Like they have the rules in the box, but don't nobody really follow them rules. That's what the government is. It's Uno. Like there's rules on the paper, but they be like, okay, but this time you actually can hit a draw 4 with a draw 4. And you actually can't hit a reverse to a draw 4. So this is not really going to change. Like closure, like, how do I put it? Them saying that they will bring everything to all the clotures, like they'll say no to push to all the clotures, isn't really going to change anything because they don't have the majority in the Senate, but it just slows things down. And the last thing is to force quorum calls at every chance. Quorum is a word meaning everybody that has to be there is there. Again, I told you them Senate folks is lazy. They're bougie and lazy, and they old. You know, they be the ones who be in there for 30 years. Those are the real lifelong, living forever politicians that be in there. They don't want to leave their office. Quorum is when someone says, well, we're not going to do the email thing. You got to physically be here to vote. So in order to get quorum in the Senate, there has to be 51 people there, the majority of the Senate. And they will even, if somebody's really like not trying to come through, they will even send the Senate sergeant to their office like, hey, I'm going to need you to come on. We trying to quorum. Okay? We trying to quorum. Get it together. So again, this is not going to stop anything. It's just going to slow things down. So I do appreciate this person's effort at saying like these are different tactics that the Dems can deploy. But the truth of the matter is a lot of this is optical. A lot of this is not actually changeable. I know that's a word I made up. You can use it. Feel free. It's not actually changeable because they waited so long. And the truth is, I don't believe that Dems actually really want change. I don't believe that Dems actually are here for anything progressive. And so that is why they always really show up just to pacify. But you know what? This sister, the Peace Oracle on Instagram, yeah, Dana Lynn, she's going to speak to you because sometimes y'all don't want to hear me. So I'm going to let somebody else say it.
The Democratic Party is not progressive, and it is not leftist, and it does not represent the left politic in this country. The Democratic Party functions to preserve the status quo of the two-party system, capitalism, white supremacy, and patriarchy by very effectively quenching and neutralizing the spontaneous revolutionary sentiment that periodically arises in this country. You have witnessed this repeatedly over the last 10 to 15 years through the spontaneous uprisings that emerged after the murders of Trayvon Martin, Mike Brown, George Floyd, the spontaneous uprising that emerged after the election of Donald Trump. Every single one of those revolutionary sentiments was effectively quenched by the Democratic Party. How? Pandering and symbolic gestures of representation that made you believe that real change was on the horizon. By continuing to allow the Republican Party to execute each and every one of its promises, the Democratic Party have run out of boogeymen. They've already let abortion rights lapse. However, they have not used any of their majorities over the past 30 years, going back to Bill Clinton, to enshrine abortion rights. And as a matter of fact, abortion rights have lapsed under the Biden administration. For years, they have said, oh, if you elect the Republicans, they're going to start World War III and start a war with Iran. Open your eyes. What is happening right now in the Middle East that is not only funded by the Biden administration, but it is encouraged and it is the explicit policy. And to end, I'm going to say this. The ultimate symbolic gesture, the most effective pandering in history that has quenched any revolutionary sentiment in this country, that has effectively neutralized the spontaneous uprising that should have led to certain change, was the nomination of Kamala Harris and the ultimate election of Kamala Harris as vice president, and now the coronation of Kamala Harris as presidential candidate for the Democratic Party without any primary.
This isn't even actually a joyous moment. It feels so good to see another sister see what I see. Okay. I know that's a hard pill for some of y'all to swallow. I know some of y'all got angry watching that. But that really is legit. And if you really sit with yourself and you do the math and you add it up and you take out your own self-serving ego or self-protective behaviors, you'll see it. And once you see it clearly, then you can absolutely better direct your energy to how you can use your critical thinking skills to create the change that you wish to see. AmandaLand.
Let's get it.
I really just wanted to play it again. I enjoyed laughing and learning with you. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And tell your friends. Also, listen to the podcast. It's available everywhere pods are casted. Listen ad-free by subscribing to Patreon Amanda Seals. Come on and join the Seals Squad. Views from AmandaLand. Live 10 a.m. Eastern, Monday through Wednesday, with content on Thursday and Friday at YouTube Amanda Seals TV. Smart, funny, and